Welcome back to another video. What I want to do in this one is show you just a little bit of code that can be used to make your VR projects or your game dev projects easier in general. So what I want to show you is how to show you to fix, essentially, is when it comes to accessing content from our character, let's say our VR pawn, what we have is we've got our components and we want to access those anywhere. And the main things as a VR dev we want to access typically is the motion controllers. In this case, we have 4 of them inside of our player. So our parent class is a pawn. This is important. I'll show you why later on. But when it comes to VR dev, in some cases we want to pass information from the player, such as what hand is holding something, or we want to attach something to a motion controller. And we need to pass through references for that. So we typically have an actor component or a scene component or a casting, where we send that information from the motion controller to the actor, and then we can access that in it. What I want to show you is how we can create a little bit of code that no matter what actor we're using can get access to the motion controller inside of our player. It's quite simple overall, but it's quite effective. And to show this off, I'm going to show you inside of a component. Yeah, we'll do a component because it is a good example for that. So I'm going to go to blueprint class, and then we'll do a scene component. So a scene component can be added to any other component, whereas an actor component can only really be added once. Or you can have multiple, but in this case, scene component is going to be better. So scene component, we're going to do this sc underscore, I'll call it pointer. It won't exactly be a pointer, but it allows me to reference it easier and show you what I'm on about. So scene component underscore pointer. And we're going to open this up. So let's say we want to create a line trace and we want to attach it to one of our motion controllers. What we could do is we could create a motion controller variable and we could pass that through. However, that would mean that on begin play, we need to get our source component. Then we need to pass through the motion controller to it so the scene component can read that. However, we don't actually have to do that. We can change it up a little bit. So on begin play, we can tell the scene component exactly which motion controller we want to grab. And that's going to look something like this. So on begin play, what we want to do is we want to get our player pawn, and we're going to use this. So the way the player pawn works is it returns the pawn from the player controller at the specified player index. So when we press play, our game gets a controller essentially, and then we can use this to reference it. So when we start, it's going to look for our VR pawn, and it's going to get a reference to it, and then we can actually get component. So component by class isn't new, but what we want to do, instead of just passing it straight through or doing something like a custom event and then get motion controller, we could then do in here, so I'm just going to show you what it would look like if we didn't do it this way. Motion controller, and then we could pass this through and we could have a reference to it, so we could get our motion controller. So we go to our pawn and then we add scene component as well pointer, which we just created, let's say as a child of our motion controller right grip, which is a motion controller. To set that variable for the pointer, we would have to drag this in. We'd have to get the custom event, get motion controller. So get motion controller, and then feed in that motion controller directly to it. So you can see that if you're doing this twice, one for each hand, you've now doubled up your code. Whereas in reality, you don't actually have to do any code in the player. We can just get the scene component to get itself, like get all that data itself. So event begin play, we get the player pawn, so it doesn't care which one it is. It's just going to be the first one. And then we're going to do get component, so do motion controller, so motion controller component. And now we actually have access to the motion controller. The problem with this node specifically is it's only going to get one, but in our case, the VR pawn actually has 4 of them. So we've got a motion controller left grip component, motion controller right aim, motion controller left aim, and then motion controller right. So we've got 2 lefts, 2 rights, and they're all motion controller components. So to distinguish that, what we can do is we can do get motion controller, or get components, sorry, and we want to do get components. So get components by class, and then we can do motion controller. And now if we loop through this, so we're going to drag off and do a for each loop. What's going to happen is, begin play, we're going to get our player character, and we're going to see if it has any motion controller components. If it does, we're going to loop through this code, in this case 4 times, because we know our motion controller has 4 different components. And then we're going to set that through here. So what we could do is from array element, we can do motion source. So get motion source, and we can actually do an equal. And now we have a way to say we want this specific motion source. So we're going to right click, promote to variable source, and we're going to do the little eyeball. So we're going to make it public. So what this allows us to do is if we hit compile, we can go to our VR pawn, and you see here scene component pointer. We can now say what motion source we want. So we go through and we're going to do a branch and have it like so. And then we can actually just right click on here and promote to a variable. So this is the motion controller source. We'll say true. So what's happening is on our begin play, we get our player. So this is going to be based on the class. So parent class is currently pawn. If you're doing something like the GDXR video where it's the smooth locomotion, we change our player to a character. If you're doing that, what you want to do is just get character and get player character instead, and simply just swap those around. That's all you need to do. So you need to make sure it matches the class that you have selected. So because this is a pawn, I'm going to leave it as pawn, and then ignore subtitles the way it spells it. And now we actually have our motion source. So if we do, let's do trace. That's probably going to be the best way to do it, to show this off. Instead of a simple line trace. So line trace channel. And we do the starting point, it's going to be our motion controller source. And we will do get location, plug that into start. And then we're going to get forward vector. We're going to add, it is multiplied this one, forward vector by a float. So this is just going to get the distance in front of our controller for us. And then we can do this something like 300, and then we can add these together, so, and then plug that into the end. So now what we've got is we've got a line trace from our scene component and our motion controller, and then that gets passed through so we can tell it to do something. So for duration, I'm going to do for 1 frame, and we'll leave this like so. This just gives us a visual pointer for that controller. And what it allows us to do is now go to our scene components inside of our player. So we've got our scene component on the right here. We're not passing through any variables or any information like that, but we're going to say we want our controller, aim would be better. So scene component pointer, motion controller right aim. So we'll call this scene component, let's go pointer right. And then we're going to duplicate it, and we want left. And then motion controller left aim. So the motion controller left aim, motion controller, scene component pointer right, scene component pointer left. So all we need to do now is tell it which motion source we're using. And to find that out, if you select the motion controller component, you'll be able to scroll down on the right here, and you'll see here that we have motion source. It's currently set to left aim, so we can actually copy and paste this to our, and then we want to do the same thing for our right. So we're going to change that to right aim. And motion controller source, what I can actually do is set this to be advanced display, compile, save, file, save all. And now we remove that point there. We actually have to touch it. We're not coding anything through it. These components are going to get it themselves. So if I go ahead and set up my headset, then we can jump in and we can take a look at how it runs. So if we jump in, you see now we actually have our pointers at our motion controller aim points, and they can actually interact with everything we want. So we're not telling it to do anything we specifically want. We could even say, okay, they're a child of the motion controller. Let's say we want them to be at the grip point. So we can just copy left grip. So Control C, motion controller, C component pointer left. Let's say this is now left grip. And what we'll do is we jump in, we'll be able to see the difference between their locations of what's going on. So just by using that tiny little bit of code, we can get access to the motion controllers directly from the player or any other component in our project. So this is more of a video of why the get component by class is really good. And it even reduces the size. So size map is still extremely small for the plugin. We're not referencing anything else specifically. However, if we do the reference viewer, we can see that we're referencing the player because they're attached to the player. We're just passing that data in. So left aim. And what we could also do is we could have the same code go into basically any other actor. So this is the code that you want. We're just going to get the player or the character, so the pawn or the character, get the component by class, and we're just checking to see if it is that specific motion controller that we're looking for. So now, if I don't want a pointer on my left hand, all I got to do is actually delete that. And then we have pointer only on the right hand, and we can kind of pass it through that way. So you can see how by doing this, you can use your scene components or your actor components to get information from your player without having to cast or directly reference specific content. We can just kind of search for it on Begin Play, find it, and then store it inside of the scene component. I know it's a bit long-winded, but it's just really cool to use, and it helps you tidy up a lot of your code. I use it specifically for the GDXR template for the latest update. I've redesigned a couple of things, and by using this, it allows me to move logic from the player itself to actors or actor components, and then the player doesn't actually have to care whether something has a reference to it or not. Just the thing that wants the reference can look for it. You could do a print string to say, okay, print string, which one do we not get a reference to, or has it failed? And then you can use that as you wish. Just to wrap up the video with something fun, what you could do is you could create a actor component. So actor basically underscore pointer, and then we're going to create a blueprint interface. Blueprint interface EPI underscore pointer example, and then call this actor hit this function. I've got a video on blueprint interfaces if you want to check those out. Make sure to have a look on the channel. But in this case, what we could do is we can just search for a hit actor, or we do component, because we're going to have this inside of an actor component. And have interface or 50 interface. Does implement interface, and that's going to be pointer. Okay, if we're hitting something, then we can activate true. If it has the interface, that's cool. And then we can do activate actor message, or actor hit message is the correct one. So actor, and then we pass that through. So now any actor that we hit that has a component with an interface will actually receive that message. So now AC hit pointer, we could add this interface to it. So implement interface, search for pointer example, compile, and then we can do event actor hit. And what we could do is we could, or actually in this case, we'll do print message. Actor hit, and we pass this on like so. And then if we take something like this top right cube, we could just take this actor, drag it on, so the actor component, drag it on, and now when we point at it, we should get a print string, unless I'm not getting the correct one. Let me double check. Pointer, hit actor as component here would probably be good. Get component by class, pointer hit, and then we can actually just feed that straight through to there actually. So that should work a little bit better. So we hit the actor, we see if it has the actor pointer hit, and then we just send a message to it if we do. So there we go. We can actually point through it, and just to make it go a little bit longer, what we could do is inside of our actor component, we could do an event dispatcher. We say actor hit, and then actor not hit. So when we hit, we call it, and then we call not hit. We do a retriggerable delay. So after 0.2 seconds, we just say actor's not hit anymore. And now what we can do is inside of the cube. So in this one here, we have it set up so we've got this component only on this one. We're going to add it to all of them. So I'm going to open up the grabbable small cube blueprint, say actor component pointer hit. And now if we do begin play, we could drag this in, or we could do on hit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to assign it to hit, and then I'm going to assign to not hit. And now we can actually tell this blueprint to do something when we're pointing at the cube or when we're not. So in this case, we do static mesh. So overlay material, plug that in like so, and I'm going to do the same thing over here, just copy and pasting the set overlay material and then connecting it up. So this one, when we're not hitting it, we're going to remove it so it goes clear. And then this one, we can just choose any material as an example. I don't know if I've got any set up by default. Let's just do clear code to see what happens. But now when we press it, all of these actors, these cubes will have that material on there. And you can see here now that we can actually point at it, and it will change the material based on the hand. Let's say we want it on the left hand now. All we're going to do is go into our VR pawn, copy our pointer right. So copy motion controller left aim, paste it onto there. Oh, motion controller left aim, make sure it's on there. Change this left aim, and now we compile, save, and we jump right in. We've now got 2 pointers, and then we can go through and add it in, which is super cool. And now you can kind of make it do whatever you want. So it wasn't a tutorial on setting up the pointers or how you can get the blueprints to talk to each other. It was literally a case of showing you how you can use this little bit of code to access any content in your player. That goes for stuff like the camera, the hands. If you can think about it, you can get it, just get the component by class and go through. But I wanted to show the motion controller because I think that's a lot. When doing VR dev, we reference the motion controllers quite a bit, and not having to have a hard reference to those specific places, going from the player or directly lined up through code, just makes it a lot easier to work with. So if you enjoyed this and you want to see more little snippets of useful code that you can use in your projects, please let me know down below. It was a lot of fun working on these ones and trying to come up with little things to do. But for now, I think that's it. I want to say a big thank you to everybody over on Patreon and YouTube members who has been patient with the delay in content at the minute due to me moving house. So we're slowly back up and running. A couple of little issues with internet speeds here and there, but we are back up, new videos, and let's get going. Yeah, thank you to everyone, and I will see you all later on. Bye.